Hi golfers, Nick here from Nick Taylor Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week in golf tips, we're going to do a comparison with the iron and the driver using the stack and tilt golf swing. In my experience, this is one of the most popular questions that I get on my channel. What's the difference between hitting an iron and a driver with the stack and tilt golf swing? Well, in today's video, I'm going to discuss the changes you should make at setup and in the swing to help you hit the golf ball better. In my experience, I hit the driver a lot more consistent, I hit it further and straighter using the stack and tilt golf swing. There's certainly a lot of misconceptions out there. You can't use the stack and tilt golf swing when you're hitting the driver. Well, I can hit the ball well over 300 yards using the driver and the stack and tilt golf swing. So I'm going to share my secrets today between using the iron and the driver. Before we look at the differences in the setup and the swing, I'm just going to hit a couple of shots here. So the first one would be just with the 7-iron. This would be my standard sort of shot. So we're going to get some club data before we take a look at the two different golf clubs. So first up, just a 7-iron. So I usually expect a tight little draw of a 7-iron. So that would be a ball that starts out to the right of the line, draws back in towards the line. So with the 7-iron there, pretty good shot, it felt pretty good. So pretty much typical distance, around about 170 carry with the 7-iron. You can see tight little draw. In terms of the club data, you can see there 4.6 degrees into out and 4.3 degrees downwards with the club head speed around 93 miles an hour. So we're going to hit the driver. So I've got the TaylorMade Sim 8 degrees, diamond stiff. So we saw with the iron there, I was 4 degrees down, 4 degrees into out. So now with the driver, let's see what the difference is in the club data. So I'm not expecting to hit down, certainly not as much as I did with the iron. So this is going to be on my normal sort of stack and tilt golf swing. And then we're going to see what the difference is. So similar type of flight, a ball that starts out to the right and just draws back in towards the target. That's kind of what you would expect. So in terms of distance there, pretty good. About 322 was the total. You can see a nice tight little draw. In terms of the club data, 117 club head speed, 3 degrees into out and 2.3 degrees upwards. You can see contact there just above the center as well. Launched around 12, span about 1800. So you can see they're a pretty good shot. You'll take that, carried around 296, total 322. So let's now talk about the differences at setup, why we get different club data and how you can hit the driver a lot better. So we saw the two shots there. I was 4 degrees into out and 4 degrees downwards with the iron. With the driver, I was about 3 degrees into out and I was actually hitting up around 2 degrees. So very different angle attack, about 6 degrees difference in the angle of attack. That's to do with the club we're using and the fact that the driver's off a tee and it's a lower loft. So with the driver, we need to launch that ball high with low spin. With a 7-iron, we're trying to compress the golf ball, launch it a little bit lower. So let's now take a look at the setup differences with the iron and the driver with the stack and tilt golf swing. So first up, we're going to take a look at the setup with an iron, then compare that with the driver. So on my mat here, I have my grid set up for the club path and the hand path. So hands and club work around my body and then back in on the way through. I've talked about this a lot in other videos. Today we're really just going to talk about how I set up. So when I take my setup here, you'll see how I place my left heel on this line here. This is kind of the center point of the golf swing. It's kind of where my left shoulder is. This is like the tangent point of my grid, where the club reaches most outward point before it starts moving back inwards. Now we have the ball behind this point because this helps us hit downwards and slightly into out as long as we stay on the grid and on plane. Ball position here is about a club head behind my left shoulder. Next thing I do is take my stance. So when I take my stance here, you'll see my feet are turned out. Roughly my heels, my hips and my shoulders are in line. They're almost stacked on top of each other. When I set up, I move a little bit of pressure to the left side. So I'm basically setting the center of my hips and the shoulders more forward, basically over the golf ball. Too many golfers set back behind the ball with a handle back. I'm actually moving the centers further forward. This helps hit downwards and get the low point in front of the golf ball. So now let's talk about the driver differences at setup now. So the first thing I would say about the driver is we actually play the ball on the center. So basically the tangent point of the grid, which is basically the left shoulder. So already now the club should be going straighter into the ball and it shouldn't be going downwards as much. To help with the angle of attack, we saw the difference between the iron, which was 4 degrees down, and the driver, which was about 2 degrees up. First thing I do is widen my stance. I still turn the feet out, but I widen my stance. So by widening my stance, this helps me have balance in the swing, but also helps me create the right side tilt that we need for the driver. Too many golfers with a stack and tilt golf swing, they sort of lean too much, too far forward, and they don't have the side tilt to shallow out the angle of attack. The next thing I do at setup is I still bump my centers forward of my shoulder and my hip, but I just bump my hips a little bit further forward, and this just gives that slight side tilt to my shoulders. The handle position with the driver is more neutral, still pretty much on the left inside of my left leg here, but with the iron the ball was further back, so there was more shaft lean. So still feels like my hands are slightly ahead, but they're not excessively ahead like they were for the iron. So you can see the differences at setup there between the iron and the driver. So now we're going to talk about differences in the swing and why the driver creates a longer swing and more speed and more shallow angle of attack compared to the iron. So we're still creating quite a bit of speed with the iron, but not as much as we do with the driver. So first of all, obviously the driver is longer than an iron, so you're going to create more of an arc or a wider arc to swing the club, which is going to create more speed, plus it's lighter. In terms of the technique, so we've seen the difference at setup. Now in the swing, I've got both swings recorded here, so we can take a look at these in detail, but I'm just going to explain to you guys as I talk through these. So first of all, we saw the differences at setup. So the setup with the iron was more stacked with the centers, whereas the driver was slightly more tilted away, even though it feel like I'm putting my pressure forward. This is the point here. The weight is forward, but it's a different setup with the driver with a wider stance, and the hips slightly more forward than the shoulder center of the driver, just to shallow out the angle attack. So let's look in detail now in these movements in the swing. So in the backswing, you'll see how my arms are straight with the iron and the driver. The difference being that I've actually turned a lot more with my driver, and in the backswing my right leg will actually straighten more degrees to help me turn. So I'm actually turning more with the driver, and it gives me more freedom to swing this arm around. It's very important with the driver, we're trying to hit the ball higher and further to launch that ball as far as we can down the fairway. So the backswing is slightly more extended and turned in the backswing. That's why this knee flex almost locks out in the backswing and then reflexes by the time it actually gets to the top of the backswing. So once we've arrived at the top here, the difference in the downswing, both clubs my hips are pushing forward and turning, but with the driver I'm actually pushing the hips more and sliding this foot to really push the hips and extend the body and hit the ball slightly on the up. I don't want to be hitting excessively down. One of the biggest issues I see with golfers with the driver is they get their head too far in front of the golf ball, which tends to lead the club from out to in and quite steep into the ball. So we're trying to shallow it out by pushing the hips forward and up. So my side tilt with the driver is higher than it is with an iron, partly down to the way we set up, but also as I go down into the downswing here, you'll see how my right foot sort of slides, my hips push up. Now, interesting, going into the finish here, both swings look the same. The actual finish position, I'm not rolling the hands over, I'm extending the body, the hands and the club are finishing roughly in the same spot. So from the face on camera, the finish position looks very similar with the iron and the driver. So who would have thought it, eh? About 300-yard carry with the driver using the stack and tilt golf swing. I don't think you could use the stack and tilt swing and hit the driver a long way. Interesting data there, guys. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're going to find out a little bit more about the stack and tilt golf swing, make sure you check out this playlist, and I'll see you again next week for another video.